Hey, time to shine today. Varsity Squad, it is Scott Ferguson, and I've got my leatherneck here from the Marines, or like they like to call themselves, the men's department of the Navy. Now, he's a fired up individual. Somebody, his story is amazing, and I can't wait to get to it. But like I said, my good friend Ben Killoy here is a U.S. Marine veteran. He turned blogger, life coach, speaker, and he has a rockin' podcast as well, whose mission is to bring military veterans' dads home to their families. He resides in Janesville, Wisconsin, Cheesehead, what? With his wife and 3 beautiful kids. And it's funny that I read through his profile, guys, and the big thing that kind of stood out to me is I probably was in the military a lot before him, because I was in from 90 to 96. But there's separation that you go through, like a little 2-day class, and they don't really get you ready for the civilian life. And what Ben does is he takes those veteran dads and kind of molds them in and helps them level up. And I'm so excited to dig in here, because when he tells a story, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. So Ben, without further ado, if you can, I'm going to have you come on and introduce yourself to Time to Shine Today Varsity Squad. But first, what is your favorite color and why?
My favorite color is kind of biased based on where I worked and whatever branded colors I had. So a while I worked at a company where their color was orange. I just was let go from a company whose color was red. And I would say those 2 colors really got into my mind. But always growing up, it was always blue. Blue was always my favorite color.
Love it. I love it. Love it.
Even though I was in military green, blue was still always my favorite color.
Awesome. Yeah. You got, like I said, everybody, he has just a stellar story. And I'm just going to let him go. And if you can kind of give us the origins of maybe getting out of the Corps and then how you move forward and now you're helping others level up.
So my story actually turned out a little bit different before. I'm going to go before the joining the Corps. So okay. I was 2 weeks away from joining the Air Force because I wanted computers and I wanted the easy way. And I thought Marines were just a bunch of grunts that shot stuff up. So I really didn't even spend much time looking at the other ones because I was only going for computers and I wasn't looking for the military. I was looking for the education. Mm-hmm. Well, the Marine recruiter was at our church picnic that year. And that day changed my life because my mom was worried that I wasn't exploring all my options. So she goes over and talks to the recruiter first. And then I come over and quickly after talking to him, turns out Marines have everything that the Air Force has. Next thing you know, I'm talking to him in the guidance counselor's office that next week. And 2 weeks later, I'm raising my right hand for the Marine Corps, which I would say was the scariest thing that I've ever done because I would have been voted least likely to join the Marine Corps. I wasn't fit. I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't run. And for me, it was kind of like I need to choose a hard path. I didn't really know that at the time. I think I probably did it because I was too afraid to tell them no back then. But honestly, looking back, it was the hardest path that I could have taken. And I had never really had a hard path. I grew up on a farm, so I knew what hard work was, but I didn't really have a hard path where I needed to fall down multiple times. I would say that I had a fairly easy path growing up. But for that hard path, that really set me on this idea to go in the Marine Corps to really just kind of peel back. I mean, boot camp was a hard emotional. I wasn't a person that was emotionally tough. I didn't have resilience. And so I remember there's times in boot camp that I broke down and cried. And just throughout the time, I did most of my time in Okinawa. I did 3 years over there. Just got kind of a big view of how the world works, where I could fit into it. I got out with the simple idea that I knew I was meant for something bigger, but I had no idea what that was. And I just knew that the Marine Corps was going to hold me back because I couldn't shoot and I couldn't run. And those were things that needed to get ahead. And so I felt like I was a good Marine, but I wasn't a good Marine the way the Marine Corps measured me by. So I got out. But then the problem was what you were talking about, TAPS, is the TAPS code teaches you how to get a job and land that job, but it does not teach happiness. It sells happiness, but it doesn't actually sell the product that actually delivers the result. Right. And for me, I got lost in this idea of becoming a civilian and losing a part of myself that I had really forgotten the different things in the Marine Corps had taught me that I really fell in love with, like leadership and helping people and individuals and Marines become something better. Like a lot of Marines get labeled as a bag of ass and a shit bag, and they just get written off. Right. I love taking those Marines and helping pull out the Marine that they themselves couldn't even see. Like they had identified with this label of being a shit bag, and they were just going to live with it. And it was I took it upon myself to really pull out that Marine and identify like those core qualities. And that's what leadership is. But I forgot about that for almost 10 years. So part of the TAPS code was I got a job. I was going to college. I was going for electrical engineering because that's what they told you need to do. You need to get a degree. You got this GI Bill. It's part of what you should do. It's part of the package. But I ended up failing. I ended up dropping out. I wasn't good at calculus. A love of electricity didn't make me good at it. And my grass dried up because that was like 2013 is when I dropped out, and I got out in 2007.
Okay.
And that was my life was going to get better. If I can just get this degree, everything will be better. Or that was a lie I told myself. So when that went away, like, man, what am I going to do?
Right.
And so it was 6 months kind of just lost in the desert a little bit. And I just had, my daughter was just born that same year. And I remember looking at her face and I'm like, what kind of father am I going to be without this degree, or even knowing where I'm going to be, or how will I provide if I don't have a path? And it was a simple seminar that was just making the transition from staff to supervisor that opened my world up to this leadership idea. And so then I just went all in. I got introduced to names like Zig Ziglar, and I got hooked on his stuff. And then once you start pulling back the veil, then you start all these different things. I found Dave Ramsey, all the self-help that's out there, but I had no idea if any of this existed until that seminar. That seminar like lit a fire of leadership that probably took me still another 5-6 years to unpack and understand who I was and understand what really brings Ben Killoy to the table. And it wasn't until 2008 that I went to a seminar for military influencers, and I told my story about trying to do something with a veteran dad life coach or a veteran dad podcast. It was really half-baked, and I honestly didn't believe it in myself either. But I told her my story, and she started crying because her husband came home from war, but mentally didn't come home from war. And it hit her square in the chest that she's been fighting to save her husband, but yet he's still not coming home. Sure. And her kids are at stake here, essentially. Everything in the family is at stake when a dad doesn't come home. And so that validated my story, my voice. And 3 months later, I launched the Military Veteran Dad podcast on January 1st, 2019. Now over a year and a half into it, over 90 episodes. And I'm loving every minute of it, because the more I dive into it, the more this mission is needed, the more my voice is needed. And I understand what something that a lot of veterans, and let's be honest, a lot of people don't understand, is the power of their voice. That I podcasted it for the whole year with doing just interview shows and having a full-time job. And what I realized, I did some solos last fall, and I realized that like I have more to say than I have airtime to say it. And the listeners were liking me. Like I asked one of the guys one time, what do you want me to do more of? And he's like, I wish you would talk more. And I was like, okay, well, that's advice I wasn't expecting.
Right.
So I kind of just flirted with it, and I was like, I really liked it. So I started a solo show in January called Fatherhood Friday. And that's just me on the microphone and just bringing my voice and my value. And that in itself has allowed me to gain more confidence, even COVID. So like this year has been super crazy, because my story, like you think it's great up to that point, like it changed everything on January 27th. I went into work like a normal day, and by 9 o'clock, I found out my position at work was being eliminated. Oof. So my world got rocked even before COVID rocked it. And so February 14th was my last day in the office. And from that point, I knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. That's kind of like my thing. My kids are 8, 5, and 3 right now, 8, 5, and 4. And I just want to be dad right now. And I want a business that allows me to do that. So I went all in. I was going into professional public speaking. Then COVID hit. So then it kind of twirled it up again. But then I decided to pull back a little bit and focus on my health. Weight was always something I struggled with. And there's been a social media challenge by Andy Frisella from the Real with AF podcast, 75 Hard. Yeah. And I was like, this is as easy as life is going to get during quarantine. So I started 75 Hard. The version you're seeing here in the video is not the version that would have been here 6 months ago. Like I've seen video of myself looking back. I'm like, who was that guy? Like I didn't have a beard. I've never had a beard in my life. I've lost 25 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, and so now I'm like even more alive as I step into my voice and my passion, and more of me is able to come to the surface. And like, it's been a wild ride. And this year has been even crazier, because even before I lost my job, my 2020 word was belief. Mm-hmm. And that word is rooted in that I was searching for so long, for 5 years during my self-help journey, for the answer, the podcast, the book that was going to open up or change everything.
Sure.
But what I realized this year, more than any other year or in myself, is the only thing that I was missing was a single belief that I had everything inside to do everything I've ever wanted. I myself needed to believe that I was capable of doing it.
Love it. So let me ask you something. With you getting kind of let go from your position or whatnot, how did your family with your wife, mainly? How did she take that on, that you were going to be the domestic engineer? Because a lot of times the women is the domestic engineer of the family. How did she take that on, along with her support with you starting Military Veteran Dad?
So it's been kind of one where she kind of didn't understand it. Like for the podcast, she didn't necessarily understand it, but it was something that she was okay supporting and different things.
Sure.
And she's a school teacher, so we still have some income, and she's a kindergarten teacher, so she was never a stay-at-home mom. So it wasn't like I was intruding on some space and we were trying to divide.
Right.
So she's always had that. So we had some cushion. We have benefits through that. But I would say there's a lot of fear with when I brought this idea to her, and through COVID, it was kind of came and like solidified and made it easier, because not having a job, the job's kind of going away. Right. It kind of just forced us to be together more and allowed me to work on the podcast more. But I would say there was definitely fear, and it wasn't easy. And there was definitely hard days. I remember when I first came home and told her, like, she asked me 4 times because she thought I was joking. And those first few weeks, like, it was a very difficult feeling for her to process, because I had that job for 8 years and it was always a constant, and it was just something she kind of dealt with in her head, that it was always there. And then poof, just like for me, it was gone.
Right.
But I had been kind of emotionally preparing for it, because I wanted to leave that job for a long
you wanted
time.
To
but she was used to it
right.
being steady there, and like it just being something she can expect and understand. But I would say through probably the 6 month, it's been a healing process for both of us to heal and grow and get acceptance to it. Like,
good. It's growth.
I would say even for me, like the idea of when I have different job interviews that I flirt with, like in the early months, like I had huge anxiety related to it, because I was like, I never want to feel stuck like that ever again.
Exactly.
And I feel like I was going back to jail if I had to get a job.
Right.
And I've kind of healed from that process, because like 8 years is your life, is a long time, just in the snap of your fingers to have removed for no other reason than they don't need you anymore. Like, that's a hard emotion to process. And veterans don't process emotions already very well.
Right.
I'm an emotional guy, so I feel like I got a leg up on that part, but it was still difficult, because you still have to dive into hard thoughts, hard truths, hard realities, and face them head on. And it's those emotions that we don't face as veterans that prevent us from coming home to our family. It's the ego that says you have it all together. That's going to prevent you from coming home. Like, these are all things you got to turn off in order to fully be present with what you're feeling.
Ben, speaking of that, what is your secret sauce then to help these veterans as they come home and starting the transition, to help them find that blind spot and help them turn that corner?
Well, I was telling you before we hit record that I was talking to a dad this morning, and for him, I was talking in the basic, I was giving him some of the content that I have, and friends is one of the major things that transformed my life. Mm-hmm. So when I was 30, my midlife crisis was dying alone. That when I reached the end of my life, no one was going to care whether Ben Killoy existed or not. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I started with talking with dads at the park, and those friends that I started creating, that ability to talk to people, really helped get me to where I am today.
And you started those conversations. I did listen to that.
Yeah, I started with those conversations. I had to lead with that. And he was talking about a friend that he has, but he always feels awkward when he's talking to him. And I'm like, does he make it awkward, or do you make it awkward? And he's like, I make it awkward, because I'm always rambling. I'm like, you're rambling because you're hiding something.
Right.
You're hiding some darkness that he was shared a lot with me in that moment, but he hadn't actually shared what's really in the darkness. And I like to describe ego as a protection mechanism, as a kind of like a survival mechanism that your brain uses it as a way to protect what you want to stay hidden. So if you think of your brain and if you're in a conversation and what you're talking about is in the light, and there's something in the darkness, and you have to rotate your mind back and forth constantly to make sure that light never touches that darkness.
Sure.
And it's that darkness, though, that is your ego, that you create stories, you create energy, you create all this false narrative to protect what's in that shadows.
Right.
But when you bring what's in the shadows into the light, that's when you truly feel free. So a lot of it is unpacking truly what's in that shadows. And it's the ego is one of the very first mechanisms that a veteran or really anybody has to turn off, because until you turn it off, you're always going to try to hide what's there. And the crazy part that you don't realize in the standard way society advertises itself as this is how life works, is you think you're going to die if you reveal what's in that shadows.
Right.
But the opposite happens. When you reveal what's in the shadows, you actually become magnetic.
You grow, baby.
You grow in an exponential way. Yeah. It's like a nuke, because that magnet just gets so strong, that vulnerability, the connection with another guy when you both share something really vulnerable that you don't necessarily expect to say, that in itself is what creates a connection that allows you to feel that connected to society or connected to someone else, connected to your wife, connected to your kids. But as long as you hold that darkness back, you are always going to feel disconnected. And getting them to feel
So
connected
you
to
give them a
something.
platform at Military Veteran Dad to voice then, correct?
Yep. Really, the
Beautiful.
voice, to understand it, and just the feeling that they're not alone. Like, fuck, that's the one thing. Like every episode I have, I always tell the guest, our only objective is for you to share something vulnerable that cancels out the echo inside their head that they're alone. And that's the biggest thing, is it's an echo chamber. And until you let these thoughts out, they just get louder and louder. And they always cut. The end result in the worst case is that your life is better, your family's better without you, and I should just take my own life. Like, it always comes to that conclusion.
Do you explain to them that there's going to be a process? Because I coach, quite a few people one-on-one, and I have a big grouping coach that I'm blessed for. Do you explain that it's a process to this, that inch by inch, it's a cinch, by the yard, it's hard? A lot of people, especially being a veteran or even like myself, we try to bite off a lot and expect that, because in the military, boom, you're expected to do something. The change is supposed to happen then and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did you explain to them there's a process to this and to be patient with it?
I explained there's a process, and I explained patience is one of them. And even in my life is the same. Like, I wasn't like this overnight, and every part of it has just been peeling back the onion in a different way. And for me, growing. But I think what a lot of veterans, like, it's kind of like the Motrin analogy, where in the military, anything's wrong with you, you take Motrin and water, and it just makes you better. Like, that's what you're sold.
Right.
And they expect some of the same thing. Or even when you go to the VA, I think a lot of people think if they go to the VA to get help, like, there's just gonna be this pill, and they know what they have isn't a pill, and they can't fix it. But it's that process of talking. And I explained that it's ultimately what you need to have is that idea of what matters. And to a dad, I always try to really like, the one thing they don't fully see, and it's kind of like the thing, if I can get them to see this, then they can give the energy to get through where they need to go, is that they realize that the one thing that matters the most is their family. And there's also one kind of idea that when veterans transition, we never switch from a legacy of what our service meant,
right,
to a legacy of why our family fucking matters.
Absolutely.
That if you lost a friend in Iraq, I always tell dads that he died so you could go home and be the best fucking dad you could be.
Man. There's that.
And like, what would he tell you if you were feeling sorry for yourself right now? He'd be able to tell you, get off your ass and go hug your kids, because I can't.
Yeah.
My kids never get to feel their father's love again, and you do.
Right.
You need to live your life in a way, and with the gift that I gave you, and just getting them to understand the presence that your family can bring you.
Absolutely.
That process, I think, is where I start, where it's about understanding the value right there in your family, because everything fuels from your family, not like you don't create something on the side to fuel your family.
Sure.
Because, like, it's the idea that if I just work my ass off, my family will be happy.
Gotcha.
It doesn't work that way.
Ben, so have you seen the movie Back to the Future with Marty McFly? Okay.
Yep.
So we're gonna get on our DeLorean. You're gonna ride back to the 18-year-old Ben Killoy. What kind of knowledge nuggets are you dropping on that Ben to maybe help him level up with what your knowledge is now? Okay. In your wisdom is now. What kind of knowledge nuggets would you drop on him to help him shorten his learning curve? Maybe level up a little quicker.
That's easy. And it's summed up into kind of a Killoyism, which are kind of my weird truths to the way I live my life. And there's one instant truth that evolves through all the different things, whether you've got a problem as a veteran or whether you've got PTSD, it doesn't matter.
What is it?
The amount of people that you talk to daily and strangers that you talk to daily is directly proportional to the amount of opportunity you have in your life. So a lot of people have no opportunity. They feel stuck. They don't know where to do next. They don't feel like they can get a job. They don't know what they want to do with their life. But the amount of people that you talk to daily is directly proportional to the amount of opportunity. In those conversations, you get reflected back value in yourself, but then you also get exposed to such a new opportunity. That's why people love podcasts. There's so much new worlds that people get exposed to listening to podcasts. Imagine if you were doing that in an intimate conversation and you met someone that can actually take you with you.
I love that. And
you never can know that if you don't actually start talking. And I wish I would have started talking to strangers so much earlier.
We call it getting your asking gear here. Always asking, always meeting new people. So we talked about the dash here. I want to know how you want your dash remembered. That little line in between your life date and expiration date. How do you want your legacy statement? How do you want your epitaph? How do you want that dash remembered, Ben?
I want that dash remembered in a way that says that people remembered me for I gave a shit and I was there when others weren't. Because that's often like I'm pulled into a conversation, and there's something I wrote in a blog post. I wrote a letter to myself to why I was worth living about 3 or 4 years ago. And in it, I wrote, early in life, people pushed you down so that later in life, you could pull people up.
Love it.
And that gave me so much purpose. And so that's kind of how my mantra is. I'm always out there trying to pull people up because I was there. I know what that face looks like.
So what is there, when you start meeting with people and people that you coach, is there any good question that you wish they would ask you but never do?
There's been a question that I've been leading with, and it's been giving interesting results, is what's the last thing you expected to share with me today in this conversation?
Okay. Skipping
the fanciness or fixing any of the questions that try to pull to it. Like, go to the root of like, what's the last thing that you expected to share with another random man today? Because that's usually the root of whatever they're feeling. And it takes you asking questions and probing there and for them to get there. But like, it's been a good BS question to cut through a lot of that noise. Because when they do share it, they're like, I wasn't expecting to share that, but I feel better. And that, so, like, that feeling helps them so much. Beautiful. So what's 3 things Ben can't live without? I can't live without my kids. I can't live without my wife. And I would say something that oddly to pair with those, I absolutely love coffee. I've become a coffee snob over the last 3 or 4 years. There you go. And I absolutely love sunrises and sunsets. There's something about a sunrise that symbolizes a brand new day, and a sunset that symbolizes the beauty of what was. And I'm like Superman. Like, when that sun hits your body, I just feel more alive and capable to deal with what life is going to give me that day. Love it. So what's your definition of a life well lived then? To me, a life well lived is I create adults and kids that understand how they fit into the world and understand how they can help change it. Because it's beautiful, dude. What I do on this earth matters, but what I leave behind on this earth matters 10 times more. It's huge. Your legacy, man. You're living your legacy statement. That's what I love Squad about Ben, is he lives his legacy statement like every day. And it's fantastic. He's chock full of knowledge nuggets. So Ben, as we wind things down a little bit, we have a leveling up lightning round. You and I could talk 15, 20 minutes about each one of these questions, but they can be answered with less than 5. No explanation. Just rattle off the top of your head. You ready? Yep. What's the best leveling up advice you've ever received? Best leveling up advice I've received is stop fucking trying and start doing. Love it. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success. Personal habits that contributes to my success is understanding how I wake up is how I continue throughout the day. Love it. Not what you're reading now, not the flavor of the month, but what's that one book? If you're like, man, I'm like, Ben, man, I'm in the doldrums, you're kind of hand me that book, here you go, Fergie, read this. For me, one thing that really helped create the life and allowed me, when I lost my job, to keep it was The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, because we killed our debt 2 years ago. Yeah. And that I was preparing for a world I wasn't even ready for, and that book changed it all for me. Love it. I'll throw that in the show notes too, people. That's a great reminder for me too. What is your most commonly used emoji when you're texting? Most commonly used emoji. I haven't been asked this question. I would say the fist bump, because I often do the double fist bump. So I go to the left and the right as a symbol, like I'm in it with you. And my policy is I always show up as a friend I wish I had in my life 5 years ago. And so that's how I lead my mindset. Love it. So not wisdom wise, but age wise, what age would you be if you could be for the rest of your life? 27. There you go. I always say 28, man. I'm almost 49, so I always say, like 28. What is there any favorite charity organization you like to give your time and or money to? The charity that came into my life about last fall, was Angels of America's Fallen. And they essentially are a nonprofit that supports the kids that have lost their parents to suicide or to war. And so they sponsor them with a sports academic from the moment they get accepted to the age of 18. And they make sure that if they lost their dad, that they always have some positive role model in their life, either through sports or a coach. And they make sure that those kids don't get left behind. Last question? It's kind of a tougher one, but what's the best decade of music? 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s? Well, I'm a country guy, so I feel like country just keeps evolving, and there really isn't a good decade for me. I'm a fan of all country, but I would definitely say the 90s, because 90s that's country, where I fell in love with. I got a boombox. I got introduced to Sawyer Brown was one of my first ones. Faith Hill even, and those songs just kind of like, let's go, baby, let's go to Vegas. Those are my
90s country's
Shania Twain, like those were some good times back then.
I mean, you even had the Garth and the Alan Jacksons and, all the feel-good music, man,
Yep.
So how can we find you, Ben?
Military Veteran Dad is the website. All the links are there for where you can find the podcast. It's under the same name, militaryveterandad.com as well. And I'm on Instagram, Ben_Killoy. Drop me a DM. I'm always open to have conversation about as open of a book. And I love reaching out and talking to other people out there that are going through something or feeling something that they need to let go. I'm a big fan of Frozen. And what most people don't realize is that Frozen, everybody has a little Elsa inside them. And if you understand how Elsa transformed through that process of both of those movies, that is the journey that every human being is going on.
Tell us a little bit about freedadcourse.com.
So freedadcourse.com was one of my very first products that I offered, and it's a free 5 audio lesson program about how to create more friends in your life. Because like I said, friendships more than anything changed my life. And if you can have 5 friends in your life that you can do life with and share, they will reflect back the best parts of you. And if you can create those in your life, that will help transform of how you continue to lead forward as a dad and a human being.
I love it. And Squad, we have just been basically privy to our own personal free masterclass. Well, a good friend, Ben Killoy here from militaryveterandad.com. He tells you, don't be afraid to be the first one to say hi. When you're meeting somebody, make that introduction to yourself, because more times than not, people are more scared. And once you break that ice, the conversation, know where it can flow and can understand that you can actually have a new friend. He tells you to understand that your voice is powerful, so be heard. He reminds us that our ego is a survival mechanism, and he wants us to bring what's in the shadow out into the light. And when you are feeling down, don't be afraid to, like Ben says, turn on the bat signal. All right. There's people like us at Time to Shine today that can put you with Ben, especially if you're one of my military brethren. We can put you with Ben to help you with that transition, or even just to really level up your life. You don't have to, be having trouble with transition. Ben will actually, he's a life coach. He can help you level up, whether, you're having problems with just the transition or not. And you know what? He reminds us that the more you get to know more people, more opportunities are going to show up. So don't be shy. Get out there. And like I said before, say hi. And he said something that really hammered home with me. He says he wants to be the friend to everybody that he wished he had 5 years ago. That's fucking baller. That is awesome. And he levels up his health. He levels up his wealth. And he's always humble yet hungry. And Ben, thank you so much for coming on the Time to Shine Today podcast. You're amazing. You're part of the squad now. You can't go anywhere, brother.
I appreciate that. And one last Killoyism for you. The world is waiting for you to go first. And when you go first, you give some permission to go second.
Love it. Fire up, man. I appreciate you coming on, Ben.
Thank you.